Today, we will be looking at residency and foreign income. An understanding of your residency for tax purposes is important to ensure you make accurate disclosures to the Australian Taxation Office. There are instances where a person may be considered a resident for tax purposes even though they are not an Australian citizen or permanent resident for immigration purposes. People will generally fall into one of three categories: Australian resident for tax purposes, foreign resident, and temporary resident. Australian resident for tax purposes must declare all worldwide income, even if overseas tax has been paid on that income. Generally, a foreign income tax offset will be available. Foreign residents are not eligible to claim the tax-free threshold, nor do they pay the Medicare levy. Foreign residents must declare any income derived in Australia, and if holding a higher education loan program or trade support loan debt, must declare all worldwide income or lodge a non-lodgement advice. Temporary residents hold a temporary visa and are not an Australian citizen or permanent resident, including their spouse. They must declare income derived in Australia as well as income earned from overseas employment while a temporary Australian resident. You will be considered an Australian resident for tax purposes if you meet one of the following four tests. Resides test. You reside in Australia according to the ordinary meaning of reside, for example to dwell permanently, or for considerable time, to have a settled or usual abode, and to live in a particular place. Relevant considerations include physical presence, intention and purpose, family and business or employment ties, maintenance and location of assets, and social and living arrangements. Domicile test. Your domicile, for example a place considered your permanent home by law, is in Australia, unless the Commissioner is satisfied your permanent place of abode is outside Australia. 183 days test. You spend over half the year in Australia, unless it is established that your usual place of abode is outside Australia and you have no intention of taking up residence in Australia. This test generally does not apply where you have taken up residence in Australia. Commonwealth superannuation test. Applies to certain Australian government employees who are eligible to contribute to the public sector superannuation scheme or the Commonwealth superannuation scheme. Common categories of foreign income include income from employment and personal services performed overseas or provided to an organisation located outside Australia. You will need to declare all relevant income as if it were earned in Australia. This may include salary and wages, director's fees, consultancy fees, business income and any other remuneration. If you own assets or investments overseas, you will need to declare all relevant returns as if they were in Australia. This may include interest from bank deposits, dividends from shares, royalties from intellectual property, rental income from real estate, pensions, annuities, lump sums from managed funds, income streams from super funds and some foreign government pensions. Capital gains on overseas assets. If you own an asset overseas, you may have to pay Australian tax when you sell the asset. You need to keep appropriate records. If you acquired an overseas asset prior to becoming an Australian resident, you are taken to have acquired the asset at the time you became a resident. Similarly, if you cease being an Australian resident while holding an overseas asset, you are deemed to have disposed of that asset at the time you cease being a resident. To accurately calculate the capital gain or loss, ensure you keep a record of the value of your asset at these times. This is a complex area of tax law and certain exemptions may apply. Declaring foreign income. It is important that you maintain written evidence of foreign income, that is in English or easily translated to English. When declaring foreign income, you may be entitled to receive a foreign income tax offset credit for tax paid overseas on that foreign income. Foreign income and tax offsets must be converted to Australian dollars. In some cases, foreign income may need to be apportioned over the Australian income tax year, for example where an overseas jurisdiction operates to a different financial year. As a working holiday maker, the first $37,000 of your income is taxed at 15% and the balance is taxed at ordinary rates. You are a working holiday maker if you have a visa subclass of either 417, Working Holiday, or 462, Work and Holiday. You can check your visa status using the Visa Entitlement Verification online system at www.homeaffairs.gov.au. As a working holiday maker, your employer also has to pay superannuation for you if you are an eligible employee. When you leave Australia, you can apply to have your super paid to you as a departing Australia superannuation payment. The tax on any DASP made to working holiday makers on or after July 1, 2017 is 65%. If you are an Australian resident for part of the year, your tax-free threshold will be less than the full tax-free threshold of $18,200 that applies to Australian residents if you became an Australian resident for tax purposes or ceased being an Australian resident for tax purposes. If you became or ceased to be an Australian resident for tax purposes during the financial year, you will receive the part-year tax-free threshold and resident tax rates will apply to your income. Part-year residents have a tax-free threshold of at least $13,464. The remaining $4,736 of the full tax-free threshold is prorated according to the number of months during the financial year you are a resident for tax purposes. If you are a foreign resident for the full financial year, you will not be entitled to the tax-free threshold. As a foreign resident, you will pay tax on every dollar you earn in Australia and foreign resident tax rates will apply. Tax residency is quite complex and it is recommended that you seek advice prior to lodging your income tax return. Please feel free to contact the Australian Tax Clinics or the Australian Taxation Office. Thank you for watching our video.